So again, today we're talking about the Science of Teaching Reading test, and we have a few more people join us. So I'm Dr. Christy Mulkey with 240 Tutoring, and we're live on Facebook. And today we're going to actually jump into competency. So if you saw our video last week we really looked at the framework and the overview and structure of the exam. We looked at the makeup of those competencies and talked about what the exam would look like as a whole. Today, we're actually going to jump in and do some questions together. So I'm going to share my screen with you so that it's easy to follow along. And again, those of you live with us, if there's any problems with audio or video, let me know. Just drop a comment in there. Okay, so you should see my PowerPoint here. Go ahead and make that full screen. All right, so today we're going to look at competencies 1 and 3 of the Science of Teaching Reading, or STR 293 exam. The state released the preparation materials about a week and a half ago, and so we're going to start jumping into those every week. This is specific to this exam, and we're going to talk about strategies and practice questions and all of those things to help you be as best prepared for this exam as you can be. All right, now let's talk a little bit about the structure and what we're going to be talking about today. So today we are going to be looking at the 90 selected response questions. So when it says selected response, it just means multiple choice where you pick one of the answers. So that's the type of question we're going to be looking at today. Now, we are going to spend the next 5 weeks working through these things. So if you pull up this link, you're going to see all the preparation materials provided by the state. Framework and overview, domain and competencies with the descriptive statements. We'll look at some of those today. And you're going to see some practice questions. And the first 25 all have rationales. So you can work through those on your own and see why the right answer is right and the wrong answers are wrong. The second 25 do not have rationales. So that's what I'm going to try to help you with, is over the next 5 weeks, we are going to look at the 25 questions that do not have rationales. Week 6, we'll be looking at the constructed response, or the CRQ question. So we're going to work through all the selected response first, and then we'll go to that CRQ. All right. Today, we're going to look at competencies 1 and 3. And you might be thinking, why didn't you do 1 and 2? Well, this exam will have what we call clustered questions. And you've seen these before on standardized exams, where they give you one set of information, sometimes a passage, sometimes a table, sometimes just some information, some statistics, just reading material. And they take that one set of information and ask you multiple questions based on that information. That's what they're referring to when they say clustered questions. So because in that 25 sampling of selected response, some of those were clustered, I had to pull the ones that were clustered together. So 1 and 3, competencies 1 and 3 had some clustered questions together. So that's why we're going to look at those together today. Now, last week we looked at the breakdown of the competencies, and we looked at those keywords, and we talked about competency 1 is focused on the science of teaching reading. We talked about competency 3 is really focused on that oral language, both the foundational principles and best practices, and then the appropriate research-based instructional and assessment practices related to oral language. And so those are the 2 that we're looking at today. Now, I have this on the screen, and I'm going to be honest, I don't expect you to be able to see this or read it. You're going to actually have to go pull these materials. It's easier to read in the PDF form or on your screen where you can zoom in. But here's what I wanted to point out. For every competency, so this is competency number 1, they give you all these descriptive statements, So in this one, it goes from A to S, so almost the whole alphabet. And so this is telling you how this competency breaks down. So this one's looking at that foundational concepts, principles of the science of teaching reading. Here's what's really key about this. I've been telling this to students and teacher candidates for years, very helpful before the exam. A lot of candidates will ask me, what can I do the night before the exam or the couple of days leading up to the exam? I can't really study anymore or practice anymore. What can I do? Read these descriptive statements. That's how I answer this question. Read the descriptive statements. So pull up the competency and read through that. You will see this language repeated in the questions. So if there are words in these descriptive statements that you don't know, you need to look those up. You need to understand the words in all of these descriptive statements. So I would highly recommend that you read this. This is Competency 1. There are a lot. There are less for Competency 3, but some of them are pretty dense. And so there's a lot in there. But again, reading these descriptive statements really helps you understand the language that's going to appear in the questions. And I'm going to show you an explicit example of that in one of these questions in just a moment. So let's jump right in and let's do some questions together. So again, these are the ones in the preparation manual that do not have the rationales, okay? So this first sample is from Competency 1, and it says, a first grade teacher provides reading instruction that is systematic and explicit and emphasizes both foundational reading skills and various dimensions of comprehension. According to research in preventing reading difficulties, which of the following additional actions would be most important for the teacher to take to ensure that reading instruction addresses all students' reading needs? Okay. Now, here's what I want to point out. The correct answer in several words explicitly from this question are drawn right out of descriptive statement H from Competency 1. So I want to go back and just show you descriptive statement H. And it's small, and I get that. But down here it says, there are things in here like systematic, explicit. You just heard me read that in that question. You just heard me read it. There are the terminology, the verbiage in these descriptive statements is often repeated and utilized in the questions. So if we go back to that question, it says things like that. The question stem addresses instruction being systematic, which means it follows a logical, planned sequence, and explicit. So that means it's targeted and direct, okay? Explicit means targeted and direct. The STEM also refers to foundational skills, which is being able to read, and the various dimensions of comprehension, which is understanding what you've read on different levels. So the one component that descriptive statement H does not really address is assessment. So it's talking about instruction. So if we look at this, I'm going to go out and pull some keywords. So first thing here, my pen has a mind of its own sometimes. First grade, that's key to know. I always look at the grade level. It may not help me in every question, guys, but sometimes that grade level is so important. So we know the instruction is systematic, it's explicit, and it's looking at the reading skills. So how to read, and then comprehension. What am I reading? And then it says, according to research in preventing reading difficulties, that stood out to me. So I'm trying to prevent those reading difficulties. Which of the following actions would be most important for the teacher to take to ensure reading instruction, here we go, addresses all students' needs? That key there is we're trying to get all students' needs. So those are key words as we look at these answer choices. So we need to look at these answer choices with those things: preventing reading difficulties and addressing all students' needs. We know the instruction's already on par because it's the same verbiage from the descriptive statement and the competency. So it says, engaging students in frequent oral reading activities to develop reading fluency. So choice A focuses on fluency, which is much more specific than what the question stem actually asks about. It's really looking at all reading needs, and this is focusing on one component, fluency. So answer A is not correct. B is also too narrow in scope. It says exposing students to a variety of genres to enhance reading comprehension. So if we're trying to get all reading needs, just like A focused too much on fluency, this one's just focused on comprehension. So hopefully you can rule out A and B, because we're going back to that all students reading needs. It didn't say comprehension needs, it didn't say fluency needs, okay? Choice C has some things that make it look right, and so did choice D. So let's look at those. It says C, providing students with daily opportunities to work independently on written exercises that emphasize key grade level reading and spelling skills. Okay, so daily opportunities sounds good. Working independently sounds good. Key grade level reading skills sounds good. But then it starts to get specific again, and it throws in that spelling skills. So we would need more information on what those students are working on independently to see if we're really targeting all students' reading needs. Now let's look at D. Assessing students' reading development regularly to implement timely and effective instructional responses when a delay is apparent. So I see two things there. That in order to address all students' needs, we would need to know what they need. And as a teacher, you know, to figure out what a student's needs are, we have to do some assessment. So assessing students' reading development helps us determine that need, and then to implement timely and effective instructional responses. So there, that's timely and effective is research-based, and it didn't get too specific to one area of reading development. So D is the best answer, most important. If we're going to prevent reading difficulties and address all students' learning needs, there's going to have to be some assessment in place to do that. So hopefully that helped you navigate that question. Let's move on to another one. This is also on competency 1. It says, at the beginning of the school year, a kindergarten teacher determines that some students have had limited prior formal and informal literacy experiences. So formal and informal. To accelerate these students' reading development, which of the following strategies would be most appropriate for the teacher to emphasize? So let's highlight some things in this question stem. It's the beginning of the school year in a kindergarten classroom. So two things to notice: beginning of the school year, kindergarten, okay? So this is their first year in school. It also says limited prior formal and informal literary experiences or literacy experiences. This means these students have not been in school before, or at least not in one that used books in their instruction, and have not been read too much at home. So that formal in a school setting or informal where they're just encountering literacy in everyday life. So they haven't had that exposure. So before anything else, students need exposure to books. We know that as early childhood, primary grade teachers, students need exposure to books. So it says to accelerate the student's reading development, which of the following would be the most appropriate strategies for the teacher to emphasize? A says conducting reading interest surveys with the students to match individual students with texts they are most likely to enjoy reading during independent reading in class and for at-home reading skills practice. There should be so many things in that one that are a red flag. There's lots of things that are best practice here. It's best practice to do an interest inventory. It's best practice to match students with text that they will enjoy for independent reading and at-home reading skills practice. And if we were in another grade level, that might be a good answer choice. But the key thing here, remember I said always look at grade level? Kindergarten. Interest survey for them to do independent reading is not age or grade appropriate, okay? So at-home reading should be encouraged. But we also know that if we're looking at these kids who haven't had much literacy experience, that at-home reading may not occur as easily. So there's many things that make answer choice A incorrect. Now, if we look at B, it says engaging students in interactive read alouds using predictable big books that feature rhyming words to promote their development of concepts of print, phonological awareness, and the knowledge of text structure. All of that leads right into what we would do in kindergarten. Before anything else, remember what I said, students need exposure to books. Read alouds with big books are the most appropriate instructional practice. And if you don't know what a big book is, it's just literally a big book. So we can sit on the carpet with in front of the students, and the text is big, the pictures are big, the book itself is big. So it just helps them see it and understand. It gives you more workable space to show the students the structure of that text. So it's very appropriate. The concepts of print, phonological awareness, the knowledge of text structure are all foundational skills that need to be built upon. So right now, answer choice B sounds very good. Let's look at C and D. C says providing students with intensive instruction in phonics skills, syllable patterns, and morphology using leveled text to ensure their development of accurate automatic decoding skills and reading fluency. And I'm going to go ahead and read D because they're similar in an aspect. D, having students help put up a classroom word wall of the 100 words that appear most frequently in children's text to encourage them to begin learning to read words automatically by sight. Guys, C and D are both best practice. They really are. But it's too advanced for the kindergarten students at the beginning of the year who have little experience with literacy or the idea of reading in general. So while these are best practice, it does not fit this scenario that we were given up here. It's not the best option. So B in this case is correct. All right, let's look at another one. Now these next two are clustered questions. All right, so you're going to see these together. And there's only one question in this 25 that do not have rationales for competency 3. So I didn't pick and choose. This is really the only one. So we're going to look at these clustered questions where it lumps competency 3 and 1 together under one prompt. Okay, so it says use the information below to answer the two questions that follow. A first grade classroom includes several students who are English learners. That should stand out. If you don't note that, box it, underline it, highlight it, something. All right, English classroom. By now you can get that I'm going to say note the grade level. First grade classroom includes several students who are English learners. The teacher is preparing text-dependent, so there's key, text-dependent prompts to ask students during a read aloud of the big book, The Napping House by Audrey Wood. This is a very common book we use in the primary grades. It has patterns and all wonderful things to help kids. The first set of prompts focuses on establishing the setting of the story. The text describes a house where everyone is sleeping. The illustration shows a granny sleeping in a bed, a cat sleeping on a chair, and a dog sleeping on the floor. It is raining outside the window. Okay, so let's look at the question. This is on oral language, okay? So it says the teacher wants to align prompts about the setting of the story. So there's a key there. So we want prompts that are looking at the setting of the story with the English learners' oral proficiency levels. So English learners, and here's a key one, oral proficiency level. So we've got first graders who are English learners, and we're looking at their oral proficiency. Which of the following prompts would best align with a student who is at the beginning level of oral language proficiency in English? Oh, they're almost giving it away here. So there's so much right there. Okay, there's so much right there. So answer choice A says, describe the setting of the story. So if the teacher prompts these first graders who are English learners at the beginning level of oral language proficiency, they're sitting in front of her and they go, we read this big book. And she looks at them and says, describe the setting of the story. What are those kids going to have to do? They're going to have to talk. That's going to be a lot of words coming out of their mouth. And it just said they're at the beginning level. So this is not our best answer. B says, the teacher asked, who is sleeping in the room? So again, how would they respond? With words. They would have to speak. C, what is happening outside the house? So these are questions we would ask while reading the story to help establish the setting, but they would have to answer orally. We could answer choice D. It says, point to where everyone is sleeping. Asking them to point instead of speak to show their thinking is the most appropriate choice, because beginning level means that the student has hardly any, close to no, oral language skills in English at all. Although the prompts complexity varies in each one, since all of the other choices require the students to speak, they are not appropriate for an English learner who's at the beginning level of oral language proficiency. So we want an option that allows them to communicate without speaking. So the only one they don't have to speak is option D. Now, if you are a 240 tutoring user already, if you're already a user, our study guide, our materials break down all the English learner proficiencies, those levels for you, so you can get more familiar with that. That is something you're going to need to know for this exam. So if you're not using 240 tutoring, you're going to need to find a source that provides for you what do those levels of reading, writing, speaking look like for an English language learner, beginning, intermediate, advanced, advanced high. Okay. So let's look at the second question under this prompt. Now I put the prompt up here again, but I'm not going to read it again. So again, we got first grade English learners reading The Napping House. And it says, as the story progresses, more characters enter the bedroom and pile on the snoring granny to take a nap. The teacher asks students to describe what is occurring on each page. In response to the text and illustrations, one English learner says, mouse sleep on cat. Cat sleep on dog. The student's grammar is most typical of an English learner at which of the following English language proficiency? Okay, so now we're using the same initial information of being a first grader with or first grade classroom with English language learners. However, our approach to this question needs to shift. This time we're given what the student says, and we have to identify what level they are. So last time we were given the level, and we had to figure out what would be most appropriate for the teacher to say. Now we're given what the student has said, and we have to figure out what level that's on. The STEM gives us some clues that we need to focus on grammar. Did everybody see that? The student's grammar is most typical of an English learner at which of the following levels. So the fact that the student is speaking at all can eliminate choice A. Because remember, on the last question, we said if they're at that beginning level, they're not going to have very many oral language skills at all. So the fact that the student talked rules out beginner. All right. We know that this student does not grammatically sound like a native English speaker. So that rules out D, advanced high. Because advanced high, they would sound much like a native English speaker. English learners at the advanced level of speaking proficiency understand basic features of grammar and are learning to use complex features. The errors made at the advanced level of speaking proficiency are typically in long, complex sentences. The errors that this student made were in short sentences that required only basic grammatical knowledge. So, mouse sleep on cat. The mouse is asleep on the cat. So there's some basic things missing there. So the student is demonstrating an intermediate level of English language speaking proficiency. So that advanced, I'm going to say that again, That advanced would understand basic features of grammar and be learning the complex features. So since there are basic errors here, that eliminates advanced and we are down to intermediate. So remember, in oral proficiency, beginning would be not speaking hardly at all, and advanced high would sound like a native English speaker. So it's just deciding between that intermediate and advanced. So again, you may have clustered questions, and sometimes that's actually helpful because it reduces the amount of reading time. You're not having to read lots and lots of prompts. All right, so key things. You need to know the test format. What we're recommending at 240 Tutoring is in your total time, which you're going to have a little transition time for directions and all of that. We recommend about an hour for the CRQ, so that's going to leave you with a little less than 4 hours for the selected response questions. We're going to get to the CRQ in several weeks. We're going to go through all the selected response questions, and then we're going to come to that CRQ. You need to pace yourself through the selected response questions. Don't spend too much time on one or you will not finish. Know the research. You're going to see that a lot when you go back and read those descriptive statements and the competencies that I talked about, and you've got to understand pedagogy. This is a very pedagogical exam. So not only do you need to know terminology and vocabulary and best practice, you've got to be able to apply in scenarios like you just saw. Remember, note grade level, note time frame, note keywords. All right, that's doing that in your practice will help that come quicker and easier when you're actually taking the test. In the rationale, so those first 25 questions that have rationales, there are links to other resources and research. I would highly recommend you read those too. It's great study material. You need to find your resources. If you're using 240 Tutoring, we have a study guide for STR. It's there. It's already there. So you can start studying. We keep getting this question. And so I'm going to answer it for everyone, and I'll keep answering it. So ask away. But yes, we have a live study guide ready to go for STR. So if you are looking for preparation resources, you can go ahead and start. If you're wondering, do I need to take this test? Does this apply to me? When does the test start? Go check out our previous 2 videos. One was back in the summer when they first told us who was going to take this test and what those time frames look like. And then last week, last Tuesday, I did a video on the overview of the test and what it looks like. You're going to need a study plan. You're going to need a diagnostic test to tell you what you know so you can be strategic about what you study and how much time you spend. All right, lastly, if you want more information, go check out our STR study guide. If you're like, I'd like to take a diagnostic test and kind of see where I stand, you can get a free diagnostic test at 240tutoring.com/resources. There's a free diagnostic test there. There's also other resources that will help you prepare for this exam. All the videos I will be doing will be right here live in our Facebook group every Tuesday at 3 o'clock Central Standard Time. And so check those out. If you don't catch them live, they stay right here in the Facebook group feed, or you can find them under media and videos right here in Facebook. We also upload these to YouTube, so you can check them out on our YouTube channel. Now, I hope to see you next week when we get into the next set of competencies. So we'll be going through the next set of questions. So I will see you next week for those. Again, I'm Dr. Christy Mulkey with 240 Tutoring. I wish you all the best as you prepare for your exam. Thank you.